This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Please.
Thank you. I welcome the opportunity to talk with you today about the financial pressures facing CBC Radio-Canada, but given the committee's motion, I would like to address the issue of bonuses first.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, thank you for giving us your time today. We much appreciate it. In your opening remarks, one of the statements that you made is that that, of course, you outlined some challenges that the CBC faces. I should also outline, though, that every other media outlet in this country doesn't start off with $1.4 billion taxpayer dollars at the start of the year. So while you might look to, play a bit of a card there in terms of poor me, let's start off with the fact, and that is, compared to other outlets in this country that are conducting themselves to perform at a higher standard than the CBC in many ways, they're not starting off with that. So I think that's an important point that needs to be acknowledged right off the bat. Ms. Tate, we're here to talk about job cuts and bonuses, or you prefer to call them performance awards. And so my first question for you is, you've had 2 months to think on it. Of course, you were asked during an interview on national news, in fact, the CBC National, you were asked whether or not bonuses would be considered for executives, and you said it wasn't ruled out, essentially. And so having 2 months to think about it, have you come to a conclusion? Will there be bonuses for the executives within CBC?
Thank you for the question. I just want to clarify the reality of the obligations of the public broadcaster. Of course, we have the privilege of a very, very generous parliamentary allocation, which, by the way, has not substantially increased in over 30 years. And during that time, we have added to traditional and radio, traditional television and radio, with digital services on all platforms. So we're operating with the same budget that we had 30 years ago. And where we get the same pressure as our colleagues in the private sector is from, in fact, the third of our budget that we earn in commercial revenues, which are absolutely vulnerable to the vagaries of the market. And that's the place where we have challenges.
Ms. Tate, in the interest of time, could you please answer my second question? My question, there wasn't actually two, there's just one. Mm-hmm. Perfect, if you could answer it, thank you.
So to the question of performance pay, as I have said in my remarks, the performance pay is a critical part of total compensation.
My question was just whether or not you would be giving it. Will you be giving bonuses to executives?
My response to that question is to say that we have a process, a rigorous process. It is not my decision to award performance pay. It is, in fact, the decision of the board of directors, and that decision comes at the end of the fiscal year. We have another 2 months before we reach the end of the fiscal year. And as I have also said in public, everything is on the table. So we will see at the end of fiscal year, based on results and where we are financially.
So as the CEO, you do not make the decision. You have no say in whether or not bonuses are granted.
All of the management team measures and analyzes our results on an annual basis, which are published very clearly in our quarterly reports.
As the CEO, you have no say in whether or not bonuses are given.
All of the management team presents to the board of directors the results of our year against KPIs, key performance indicators that have been tracked throughout the year, and based on the analysis and the results, the board of directors makes its decision. I should just point out, perhaps of interest, for example, last year, we did not meet 2 of our KPIs, and our bonus level
I'll go to my
was
next
reduced.
Question now. I realize that you'll do your best to talk out the clock, so I'll just kind of keep this going along here. My next question is this. Those KPIs, would you table those with this committee?
They're public in our annual report.
Perfect. Thank you. Based on the metrics that are used then, last year, you gave out $16 million in taxpayer-funded bonuses to the staff. That was an average of $14,000 to staff members at the CBC. Most Canadians don't even see half of that in a bonus, not even a quarter of that in a yearly bonus. $14,000 was the average amount that was given to CBC staff. What were the metrics that were used in order to determine that bonus amount?
So again, the KPIs are published, and they're very clearly have to do with performance of the service. For example, digital reach. For example, engagement with news in the regions. For example, performance on engagement with kids and children. All of those are published very clearly in our annual report. And I actually want to, if I may I ask? I think your number is wrong. If I want to correct the record,
I would just highlight for you that it's interesting to me because you're saying that these are the metrics, but actually the viewership of the CBC is cut in half since you took leadership in 2018. It's come down by half. So it's interesting to me that you're giving bonuses or performance awards when in fact the CBC is performing the poorest it's ever performed. So bonuses keep going up, they keep skyrocketing, but performance, as you say the bonuses are granted based on,
I really, if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to correct the record. If I may correct the record.
Ms. Tate, my question for you, for 2023, will you be given a bonus?
I would like to correct the record, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, I don't believe the number was 16 million in last year. I'm going to ask Marco Dubé, who manages the people and culture at our company, to correct the error that the member has stated.
Sorry, Madam Chair, through you, I do have a question on the table, and that is, Ms. Tate, for 2023, will you be given a bonus?
I'm going to come back to your question after he corrects the record.
Madam Chair, I would ask you, through you, Madam Chair, the witness knows that her instructions here are to answer the questions that have been given.
We have 27
She can correct the record by sending in a written notice if she wishes.
You can do that, Ms. Tate. You've gone over time.
My time has been interrupted numerous times because the witness doesn't want to answer my question. It's very simple. Will she be given a bonus in 2020?
It's not my decision whether I get a bonus or not. Let's just be clear.
Thank you.
Ms. Tate, I just looked online, and as CEO, it is your responsibility to determine who you would recommend for bonuses and how much. You recommend that to the board, and then the board can veto you, of course, if they wish to. Now, of course, if they were to do that, it would signal that they don't have confidence in your leadership. So I think, given the fact that they've extended your contract by 18 months, they probably would take your recommendation. So I'm just curious, it's coming up in 2 months. Will you be recommending that executive bonuses are given?
I will respond to that question as I have earlier, which is to say, if we achieve the results of the current fiscal year, I will recommend that the 1,140 unaffiliated, non-unionized employees receive their fair pay, their performance pay.
Their fair pay, their bonus pay. So you will be recommending then in 2 months' time that the executives receive a bonus?
If they achieve their targets.
Okay, so you already said earlier that targets were not met in previous years, and I also looked that up online, and that is in fact true. In fact, not only there were a number of targets that weren't met, and then the vast majority of targets were only partially met, and yet still bonuses were given. So how many targets have to be met in order for bonuses to be given this year? Fully met.
So we have a system where targets can be partially met, not met, or overachieved.
Yeah.
And we go through that system. We present this to the board. The board approves at the end of the year the performance of the organization. And
how many have to be completely met in order for the bonus to be given?
Well, I would suspect that some of it have to be completely met to have...
Some of it have to be completely met? So, Ms. Tate, you're the one that gives the recommendation, so I'd like you to answer. Mm-hmm. Will your recommendation be will your recommendation be given based on some being met, 4 being met, 6 being met, 8 being met, all being met?
You understand the way it works. Let's say there are 7 performance indicators. Each one is awarded a percentage of the performance pay. So revenue, for example, is 20%. Revenue is a huge driver for the company. And so if we don't achieve revenue, we will not achieve the 20%. But that's not to say it goes to zero.
Okay.
That's what Marco is saying, that there will be a lesser amount awarded. And to your question, I very much suspect that this year we will not meet our revenue target entirely, given my comments about the Quebec market.
So, Ms. Tate, what you're telling the committee then is that the decision has been made to cut 800 jobs. That announcement came out on December 4th, right before Christmas, which is a pretty harsh time of year to make that announcement. And what you have just told this committee is that there is still an intent to give bonus pay, whether all KPIs have been met or not.
First of all, the announcement in December was an estimate forecast should our financial situation not improve, and the majority of the cuts, and it's very clearly stated in the release, if the majority of the cuts will occur in the next fiscal year. We were giving a long runway in order to be able to improve. In fact, we are very focused as a management team on improving the results and reducing the cuts to the extent we can. The longer we have to work on a problem, the greater chance we have of achieving the result.
Ms. Tate, here's a few facts. Under your leadership, trust in the media, and especially in the CBC, has declined. Fewer Canadians are watching the CBC, and in fact, viewership has been cut in half since you took over in 2018. Ad revenue has plummeted. It's decreased by 31% from 2022 to 23. And the number of CBC staff earning a 6-digit salary has doubled. And then to add to that, in the last 2 years, just the last 2 years under your leadership, more than 100 correction notices have had to be issued with regards to stories put out by the CBC. In your estimation, have you met the KPIs and therefore deserve a bonus this year?
I think I said earlier, I actually am not subject to the short-term incentive plan of the rest of the corporation because
There's no performance bonus available to you?
I have a performance pay based on my objectives, which correspond obviously to the company's, but also to additional objectives
and in your estimation, have you met those metrics that are set out for you?
Absolutely, yes. What you have described are the industry trends. I do not control the number of Canadians that have left television to go online. And by the way, equal to the number declining on CBC television that you continue to report is an increase in millions that are watching GEM. So if you're measuring viewership, I think you need to look at the totality of the experience. And that is why, by the way, Madam Chair, we submitted some documents to help the committee understand the reality of the numbers. Today, only 11% of English Canadians watch television only. 23% of Francophones watch television only. In the English market, 34% of English are totally, solely online. We're dealing with market trends, so I do not think that I or any of the management team should be evaluated on market trends.
Thank you, Ms. Tate.
I'm sure we can probably agree on some metrics that reasonable people would use to measure the success of a broadcasting corporation. Would you agree that measuring viewership or ratings is a reasonable metric to measure the success of a broadcaster?
Is one metric, so is usership.
Yeah, one metric.
Yeah.
It's. I would say it's an important metric when you're talking about a broadcaster. You said a few minutes ago that ad revenue was I think you used the word, a major driver of whether or not you judge success. So would ad revenue also be a reasonable measure of success for a broadcaster?
It would be one of the variables, yes.
Right, okay. So viewership, yes. Ad revenue, yes. Trust also, whether or not people can trust what they're seeing on TV, especially when you run news outlets. You would agree, I hope, that trust in media would also be a measure of success.
Absolutely.
Okay. And therefore errors would be another measure of success or failure. there aren't a lot of errors, and that would be a good thing. If there are a lot of errors, that would be a bad thing. Would you agree on that?
Well, I actually would put a different a response on error. I think error is a natural part of all journalism, and in the fact that CBC Radio-Canada post its corrections as quickly as we do is actually a demonstration of why we are trusted, unlike others who may not.
Wow.
So I would say that that's a trusted source.
Wow. So the speed with which you correct your errors is the way that you measure performance at the CBC. Okay. Well, as we've agreed that viewership is an important metric. We've agreed that ad revenue is an important metric, trust as well. So fewer Canadians are watching the CBC than ever before. Viewership has plummeted to half of what it was when you became CEO in 2018. Ad revenue has also crashed. In fact, it was down 31% in just 1 year, 2022 to 2023. And trust in media, and especially in the CBC, has also declined. The NDP talk about misinformation. The CBC has had to issue more than 100 corrections to grave errors in reporting. And that obviously has an impact on trust. So given the fact that on all these important metrics that you've agreed on, what justification do you have to issuing performance awards?
I want to correct a couple of your points, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, the 30% drop in revenue was between an Olympics year and a non-Olympics year. And in fact, in the years you're describing, we had 2 Olympic Games. And so we have a much higher level of revenue, ad revenue, during those years. So that explains the drop.
Okay, so were ad revenues in 2023 higher than in 2022?
I would say they were flat.
They're flat, okay.
Yeah, and that is, by the way, very much part of what's going on in the industry. Television is in decline, not just at CBC, at CTV and Global. Television is in decline, and people are moving to streaming, and they're moving to their connected television.
With all due respect, the CBC has almost $500 million in real estate holdings across the country. Big fancy buildings in downtowns across the country. You get over $1 billion in taxpayers' money to be a television broadcaster, radio broadcaster. When those metrics are down, how do you justify giving performance awards to people whose job it is to increase viewership, to increase ad revenue, to increase trust?
Madam Chair, if I may, I don't agree with the premise.
You don't agree that
no, I don't agree with the premise. 79% of Canadians say that it is important for the country to have a public broadcaster like CBC Radio-Canada. 82% say...
Who commissioned that poll?
Those are our public perception surveys that we conduct.
Oh, you conducted, okay.
But
so your polling tells you that Canadians like what you're doing. By using a
third-party léger survey firm.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. If the argument is to try to say that we're no longer of value, all I would say is that's not what I hear from Canadians.
What I'm asking about is the bonuses. With all due respect, Ms. Tate, when you give someone a bonus, and we've just agreed on the metrics that should be used to judge a broadcaster, when those metrics are down, how do you justify giving people, executives, big bonuses when they haven't achieved success by these metrics that we've agreed on?
As I pointed out, the metrics that we measure are public and tracked, and they're in all of our reports. So I'm afraid to say that trust is down. Trust is down across the entire media section, and it also affects politicians. It also affects
when you misrepresent the truth, it does affect the politicians.
The reality is we are still number one in terms of trust.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Ms. Thomas now for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, I'm just curious, what study is that based on?
That's the Gustafson report from the University of Victoria.
Okay. And what's the sample size?
Yeah, I'd have to check on that.
And how is the study completed?
They do it every year.
Okay. It just differs from other studies that have been done that show that trust in the CBC is actually one of the worst trust levels out of any media company in the country. So I just want to make sure that that is juxtaposed.
I think you would want to look at the Gustafson there. It's a university of...
Sorry, Chair, I'll just ask the witness not to interrupt me or speak over me.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm curious if you've hired any consultants during your time as CEO.
Over the 6 years that I've been at CBC Radio-Canada, I personally do not hire consultants. I don't have a budget for that, but certainly in the company there have been consultants, yes.
Okay. Were consultants used to come to the determination that 800 jobs needed to be cut?
No.
Okay, so that determination was made on your own?
It was made as a result of an analysis of our financial situation, the structural deficit that we were facing with the management team that you have before you, but also our CFO and others that aren't at the table, yes.
Ultimately, who makes the recommendation that 800 jobs be cut?
I take full responsibility for that decision.
Okay, thank you. And ultimately, who makes the final recommendation with regards to performance awards?
That's a more complex process, as I've described. We have a very rigorous, transparent, measured approach that is presented to the board of it goes to the board of directors, and they ultimately.
But who makes that recommendation to the board of directors?
The entire management team.
The entire management team.
Correct.
On the CBC website, it says you do, Ms. Tate.
The entire management team. I don't make decisions alone. I have a fabulous team that I work with.
I wonder if you would consider correcting that error on the website then.
We could.
Will you?
We'll take it under consideration.
You do that. Perhaps you can report back to this committee your final decision, yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Now, Ms. Tate, you've made it clear here at this committee that you intend to recommend bonuses for executives, and you've asserted that you yourself deserve a bonus this year. And so,
point of order, Madam Chair. Sorry, just want to make sure that when questions are being asked, they're not only not mischaracterizing what the witness has said, but also that they are factual in nature if they're making representations of what the witness has said.
I agree, Mr. Nur Mohammed. Please be careful.
Yes, point of order, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Thomas should issue a correction on the false information.
You can ask your questions. You're given your time. I don't like the tone. I might even say that it's veering on an area where I don't think is appropriate at all for you to be speaking to someone like that, Mr. Julian. It's offensive and unnecessary.
Mr. Lawrence, I'm sorry, that's out of order. Let's continue, please.
So, Ms. Tate, you've put it on the record here today that bonuses are not ruled out. That it would be your opportunity to recommend them. And you've referred to the KPIs as being your guide. You have also asserted that you deserve a bonus as well. When I asked you directly, you said yes. Actually, and so I'm moving a motion at this point in time, looking for UC from the committee. And the motion is that no later than April 1st, 2024, the CBC would provide the committee with the number of executive bonuses given and the monetary amount of each for the fiscal year of 2023.
Sorry, Ms. Thomas, I was speaking with the clerk.
I noticed.
Yes.
So I moved a motion. I'll read it into the record again.
Please.
So, that no later than April 1st, 2024, the CBC provide the committee with the number of executive bonuses given and the monetary amount of each for the fiscal year 2023. I'm seeking consent from the committee to have this motion accepted.
I need unanimous consent from the committee. Mr. Cotto?
Can I ask a question? I'm allowed to ask a question on a motion?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that information public?
Not. We do not release individual information because of we are guided by the Privacy Act. We release information in aggregate.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, Chair, I'm not asking for a name or for an identification number. Just asking for the number of bonuses given and the amount of each.
Now, I need to know, Mr. Mohammed?
Sorry, just on this point, Madam Chair, I have sort of two things I'd like to clarify. One is,
the motion. Thanks.
In fact, is that information that is ordinarily provided to the public, and is that something the CBC would, under statute, be allowed to provide, number one? And number two, when would that determination be made so that, if it's not done at that point, or if it's not organized at that point, if Ms. Tate CBC were to do this, would it be something that would already be prepared, or would they have to do this in order to support the committee's work?
May I answer the question?
Yes.
We actually, the end of the fiscal year is March 31st, so we take some time to do the assessment, and normally we would present the results to the board in our board meeting in June.
Thank you. We have 2 more minutes left in the meeting, and I'm just going to ask if there's unanimous consent, as Ms. Thomas asked, from the committee to place her motion.
No.
No,
There's
fine.
not.
Well, there's no unanimous consent, so
No
I'm sorry.
problem. Then I guess we go to a vote then. And I'll ask for it to be a recorded vote.
And can I ask another question before we go? I had my hand up.
Yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
Mr. Cotto.
So I'm under the impression, how do we have all this data? Like I open up the news and I'm reading, a report and it says that this much bonuses has gone out to this many people. Like, it seems like we have, like, how do we get that information? I know that you don't connect it to a name, but the information that the member's asking for seems to be available already.
Ask through access to information, and we've provided that information upon request, yes.
Anyway, it's moot because the motion has not been accepted by the committee. And Ms. Thomas has called for a vote. Thank you.
We'd like to move the motion then, and we're going to record a vote. It says
Yes, we're going to recorded votes. Those in favor of dealing with the motion. So go ahead, clerk.
The vote is on the motion moved by Ms. Thomas. Mr. Cotto.
Sure, point of order, Madam Chair. Can we circulate the motion so we can read it, please? There was questions. We haven't seen the motion in writing.
Well, you don't have to see it in writing, but maybe you can read it again, Ms. Thomas.
You can't. It's against.
Yeah, it's been called.
It's been called.
Have you got it with you? Have you got the motion?
And the process here, there were some other questions I think people had before we went to a vote. Is there an opportunity to ask questions or?
No, we're going to a vote right now, and we have to record the vote.
Rappel au règlement, Madame la Présidente, le vote a été demandé.
This is a point of order. Point of order.
No, there are no points of order.
No point of order. We'll just go to a vote, please, because the vote is called.
The vote has been called.
Yes. Please.
Just because the vote was called doesn't mean we go right to the vote. Is that how it works?
Let's go to the vote, please. It's been called. And it's a recorded vote. Clerk, please.
The vote is on the motion that was moved by Ms. Thomas. Mr. Cotto.
No.
Ms. Dillon.
No.
Madame Guinea.
No.
Ms. Hefner. No. Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Nope.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Ms. Gladue.
Yes.
Monsieur Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Philip.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Sorry, Mr. Phillips, great.
Mr. Lawrence. Monsieur Chaput.
No.
And Mr. Julian.
No.
So there is no consent for this motion to be discussed.